buy a classic, affordable guitar pedal, like a standard Boss DS1 or an Ibanez Tube Screamer, expecting the iconic tone you've heard on countless records, but you plug in, hit a chord, and get a sterile, generic, and artificial sound that ruins your mix. It's thin, it's harsh, it lacks the warmth and response of high-end gear. We're going to fix that right now on the workbench. We'll look at how simple component swaps completely alter the physical signal path of your instrument. By selecting specific, high-quality electronic components, you can use just $20 in parts to transform that cheap circuit into a boutique-level instrument. The massive difference in audio quality comes down to replacing mass production compromises with carefully chosen audio-grade materials. Many boutique pedals costing hundreds of dollars use these exact same mass-produced circuits, just built with the $20 in upgraded parts we're about to use. It's an open secret among builders. Mastering this process puts you in complete control of your guitar tone. To fix the harshness in a standard DS1, we first target the input transistor gain stage. Looking at the schematic diagram, we have to manipulate the circuit around the bipolar transistor to reduce its excessive treble boost. That specific boost is the flaw making the stock pedal sound like a swarm of bees, completely unpleasantly thin to your ear when you strike a chord. It fatigues your hearing, it masks the fundamental frequencies of your guitar, pushing the high-end frequencies way too hard into the front end of your amplifier.
We implement what technicians call the AMZ FAT mod. This procedure requires changing the 100K ohm resistor at position R6 on the printed circuit board to 150K ohms. Then we swap the 22 ohm resistor at R9 for a 1K ohm resistor. Using 1/4 watt metal film resistors is standard practice here. They have an extremely low noise floor and audio paths. R6 and R9 are clearly printed right next to the components in white ink. Take your time identifying them on the physical board before you ever plug in your soldering iron.
Increasing these specific resistor values fundamentally alters the transistor's bias. This restricts the electrical current flow, pulling the pedal's response back from uncontrolled, noisy fuzz into a tight, defined distortion. Instead of your chords turning to mush, you get clear string separation, even at high gain settings. When you play a complex voicing, you'll hear every individual string ring out true. Your natural playing dynamics will dictate the exact amount of grit being produced by the circuit.
When replacing these parts, component material dictates audio quality just as much as the specified values. Cheap ceramic capacitors, widely used in mass production to cut costs, can have sloppy 20% tolerances. That means the sound changes wildly from pedal to pedal. Upgrading to polyester film capacitors provides a much tighter 5% tolerance. This ensures your guitar's sound remains consistent, focused, and true to your intended design without introducing unwanted microphonics or harsh artifacts into the signal chain.
Think of capacitors functioning much like acoustic windows in a recording room. By changing their physical values, you dictate exactly which high or low audio frequencies are allowed to pass through the circuit and which frequencies are blocked from reaching your amplifier. A larger window lets more of the full acoustic spectrum pass through to the next stage, while a smaller window filters out those broader frequencies, leaving you with a highly shaped, distinct bandwidth. For instance, selecting a higher value component, like a 0.047 microfarad capacitor, will filter out more high treble frequencies. This results in a darker, warmer overall tone than if you used a smaller 0.022 microfarad component in that exact same position on the board. If you play a bright guitar, like a Stratocaster with single-coil pickups, leaning towards that 0.047 microfarad value perfectly tames those harsh highs. It rounds out the top end before it ever hits your amplifier's input stage.
Moving further down the signal path to the clipping stage, diodes are the critical unidirectional devices that dictate the precise texture of your distortion. They limit the audio signal, and their physical imperfections in letting current through are exactly what generate the harmonic textures we recognize as overdrive. In the audio world, perfectly clean electricity is boring. We want these specific components to struggle and clip the audio wave. This creates rich, musical distortion that reacts dynamically to how hard your pick strikes the string.
The physical circuit layout dictates this distortion character entirely. Placing diodes in the feedback loop of an operational amplifier creates soft clipping. This yields a smooth, tube-like overdrive much like a classic Ibanez Tube Screamer. Conversely, routing those same diodes directly to the ground path creates hard clipping. That gives you the aggressive, squared-off, heavy distortion found in famous pedals like the Proco Rat. Understanding this routing allows you to manipulate exactly how aggressive your final signal will become.
You don't need industry connections to find these parts. You can source these exact 1/4 watt resistors, tight tolerance film capacitors, and audio-grade diodes directly from specialized electronics distributors like Small Bear Electronics or Pedal Parts Plus. You can also use massive industrial suppliers like Mouser and DigiKey. Just type the specific part numbers into their search bars, verify the component tolerances, and you can have studio-grade materials shipped directly to your workbench for just pennies per part.
The physical execution of these modifications requires strict attention to detail and proper thermal management on the printed circuit board. This is where patience and proper soldering techniques separate a successful modification from a ruined pedal. Don't rush this step. Put on some music, clear your workbench entirely, ensure you have excellent overhead lighting, and take it one component at a time to prevent any routing mistakes.
You must use a soldering iron rated at a minimum of 40 watts with accurate temperature control. Set your iron to roughly 350 to 370 degrees Celsius. This provides enough immediate thermal energy to melt the solder quickly, without applying prolonged excessive heat that risks lifting the fragile copper pads right off the fiberglass board. A hot, fast touch is far safer for the circuit board than holding a low-temperature iron against the pad for 10 seconds.
The proper technique involves heating the copper pad and the component pins simultaneously with the iron tip. Then, feed 60% tin solder into the joint until you see the surface tension break. This allows the liquid solder to flow smoothly and evenly over the entire connection. When you pull the iron away, the finished joint should look like a shiny, miniature volcano, not a dull, round blob. A shiny joint indicates a strong electrical connection that will withstand years of heavy foot switching.
Safety and preparation are non-negotiable for this work. Always wear safety glasses to protect your eyes from hot flux splatters when the solder melts. Work in a well-ventilated area to avoid inhaling fumes. The smell of burning rosin flux might be nostalgic for old technicians, but breathing it is never recommended. Keep your soldering iron tip heavily tinned with fresh solder for maximum thermal transfer, wiping it cleanly on a brass sponge between every single connection.
Before any heat is applied, carefully remove the printed circuit board from the metal pedal housing. This mechanical workflow often requires unbolting the nuts on the potentiometers, the physical volume and tone knobs, as well as the input and output jacks to free the board completely from the chassis. Keep a small magnetic tray on your bench to hold those specific nuts and washers so they don't roll away while you are focused on the delicate circuit work.
Here is a valuable technique for future audio experimentation. Instead of soldering a new integrated circuit chip directly to the board, install an IC socket. This allows you to quickly plug and unplug different operational amplifiers, like the classic JRC 4558D, letting you tune the pedal by ear without ever touching your soldering iron again. It effectively turns your pedal into a hot swappable testbed for different audio flavors, so you can audition components in real time. Always test your new resistors with a digital multimeter set to the ohms function before installing them into the circuit. Workbench lighting and tiny, faded color bands can easily deceive your eyes, leading to a misidentified part and complete circuit failure. Taking 10 seconds to verify the resistance physically guarantees you are altering the bias exactly as the schematic demands. It removes all guesswork from your repair process.
After completing the component modifications, use your multimeter's continuity function across the board. Listen for the beep on your meter. This crucial step ensures no accidental microscopic solder bridges are shorting your audio signal directly to the ground path, which would mute your guitar entirely. Dragging the probes between neighboring pads confirms that your handiwork is clean, isolated, and ready to safely process an instrument-level signal once power is applied.
These calculated upgrades yield a modified pedal that completely sheds its sterile, factory constraints. It now responds dynamically to your pick attack, cleaning up when you play lightly and providing rich, organic overtones when you dig into the strings. You've taken $20 in basic components and successfully built a boutique circuit with your own hands. You've transformed a generic, mass-market box into a responsive, professional-grade musical tool.
Tell me in the comments, which cheap pedal do you want to modify?
Considering the physical behavior of diodes when clipping an audio signal, is the pursuit of perfect tone ultimately a matter of exact mathematical precision, or is it entirely about subjective harmonic imperfection?